I woke up every day with the feeling that something had to be done. It didn't matter what. The main thing was not to stop. The city outside the window lived in a rhythm that did not allow for a pause. People were running, cars were buzzing, messages were pouring in one after another. I was part of this flow. And it seemed to me that it was right. Every day began with a plan. To answer, to create, to publish, to do. I didn't ask myself if I wanted to do it. I just did it. Because that's how it had to be. Because if you don't move, you'll be passed over. If you don't show results, you'll be forgotten. If you're not useful, no one needs you. I worked even when my body asked me to stop. When my eyes burned from the screen, when my thoughts were confused, when my heart was clenching from the second. I told myself a little more. Another post. Another answer. Another step. And so on day after day. Over time I stopped noticing myself. I was a function. Movement. An answer. I don't know what it's like to just sit. Just look out the window. Just be. Besides, when I was left alone, I was looking for something to occupy myself with. Rest seemed wrong to me. Like weakness. Like betrayal. One day I woke up and didn't get up. Not because I couldn't. But because I didn't want to. I lay there staring at the ceiling. The phone was silent. I didn't touch it. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't answer. And for the first time in a long time I didn't feel guilty. It was strange. It was like I had broken a rule, but no one had punished me. It was like I had disappeared, but the world hadn't collapsed. Just was. And it didn't destroy me. That day I went outside without a goal. I didn't have a to-do list. I didn't have a plan. Just came. I looked at the trees, at the people, at the sky. I noticed how autumn smelled. How the leaves rustled. How fast the world moves if you don't chase it. I went into a cafe, sat down by the window, ordered tea. There was a notebook in front of me. I opened it and wrote. I have the right to stop. I have the right to be silent. I have the right to be. These were simple words. But they changed something in me. I don't know what will happen next. But I knew that I no longer wanted to live in the noise. I didn't want to be just a reaction. I didn't want to give up my right to pause. I just wanted to be. And learn this again. Like the first time. I hadn't heard my body for a long time. It was talking to me but I wasn't listening. At first quietly. A slight fatigue, a headache, a desire to just lie down. Then louder, insomnia, anxiety, back pain, a heart that was beating like a drum. But I was silent. I didn't have time for weakness. I had no right to pause. It seemed to me that the body was an instrument. That it should work when I told it to. That it should endure because I endure. I didn't ask myself how I felt. I asked, what else should I do? I learned to ignore the signals. When I couldn't sleep, I opened my laptop. When I didn't want to eat, I drank coffee. When I didn't want to talk, I wrote stories. I forced myself to be present where I wasn't. And my body paid for it. One day I woke up feeling as if I had been hit by a car. Everything hurt. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't get up. I lay there thinking, what's wrong with me? But the answer was simple. I'm exhausted. Not tired. Namely exhausted. Exhausted. Devastated. I didn't want to admit it. Because admitting means stopping. And stopping is defeat. That's what it seemed to me. But my body no longer gave me a choice. It didn't obey. It didn't want to get up. And for the first time I didn't force it. I stayed home. I turned off the sound on my phone. I didn't answer. I didn't create. I didn't prove. I just lay there. And I looked at the ceiling. The hours passed by. I didn't count them. I didn't plan what I would do tomorrow. I didn't think about what I would tell people. Just was. It was scary. Because I didn't know who I was without action. Without movement. Without results. But my body thanked me. It didn't hurt. Didn't scream. It was just silent. And I was silent with it. I began to notice the little things. How the light falls on the wall. How the tea smells when you take your time. How the air moves when you open the window. I didn't look for meaning. I just let myself be in the moment. It wasn't a revelation. It wasn't a victory. It was a beginning. The beginning of listening. The beginning of respect. The beginning of a relationship with myself, not as a function but as a living being. I realized that my body was not an enemy, not an obstacle, not something to be forced. It was my home, and I had lived in it for a long time as a guest. Now I wanted to go back. I didn't become different right away. I didn't become perfect. I simply started asking myself, how do I feel? And that question changed the day. Because sometimes the answer was, I'm tired. And I allowed myself to rest. Without guilt. Without explanation. Without fear. It was new. It was honest. And it was mine. Silence has always scared me. It seemed like an emptiness in which it was easy to get lost. I was used to noise, messages, calls, music, voices, background tasks. Even when it was quiet around me, I created noise within myself. With thoughts, plans, expectations. I was afraid to be alone with myself. When I started to allow myself to stop, silence came as something unfamiliar. I was sitting in a room, and nothing was heard. No phone, no music, no voices. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to be in silence. It seemed threatening to me. As if something was hiding in it. As if it wanted to say something, and I wasn't ready to listen. The first few days were strange. I would wake up and not turn on anything. I just lay there. Just watched. Just breathe. And the silence was there. It didn't scream. It didn't demand. Just was. And I began to notice that it wasn't empty. It is full of little things I had never seen before. I heard the floor creak as I walked. The sound of a kettle making before boiling. The wind brushing against the window. The sound of my heart beating when I was not in a hurry. These were sounds that did not need a response. They simply existed. And I existed with them. I started walking without headphones. I just walked. And listened. The city sounded different when I was not trying to drown it out. I heard children laughing, someone saying hello, birds chirping. And it was not a background. It was a part of me. Silence became a space in which I could be real. Without roles. Without functions. Without expectations. I did not have to say anything. I did not have to explain anything. It simply was. And it did not destroy me. On the contrary, it restored me. I started writing. Not for someone. Not for content. Just for myself. The words came slowly but honestly. I wasn't looking for beautiful phrases. I was simply describing what I saw, what I felt, what I remembered. And in the process, I rediscovered myself. I realized that silence is not the end. It is a beginning. It is not emptiness. It is an opportunity. It is not scary if you don't run from it. It is not destructive if you let it be. It is not isolating if you accept it as part of yourself. I stopped being afraid of the moments when nothing happens. I stopped filling every pause. I stopped looking for something to occupy myself with. I simply allowed myself to be in silence. And it became my friend that it wasn't easy. Sometimes I still reach for the noise. Sometimes I feel like I need to do something, say something, show something. But now I know silence is not a failure. It is not a weakness. It is not a loss. It is a space in which I can breathe. I learned not to be afraid of silence. And it answered me with peace. I used to think that rest was something temporary. Like a break between two important things. Like a pause that had to be quickly ended in order to return to real life. I didn't take it seriously. Resting meant running away. From work, from responsibility, from myself. I didn't allow myself to stop for long. If I wasn't working, I had to plan something. If I wasn't planning, I had to analyze something. If I wasn't analyzing, I had to fix something. I didn't know how to simply be. How to simply breathe. How to simply live without tasks. When I started allowing myself silence, space for rest appeared. But it didn't come right away. First I felt anxious. As if I was missing something. As if someone was expecting me to act. As if I was betraying myself if I didn't move. I lay there thinking that I had to do something. Prove something. Show something. But day after day, I began to notice that rest is not an escape. This is a return. To myself. to my body, to the moment. I didn't run away from the world. I was returning to who I am without noise, without roles, without expectations. I started doing simple things. Making tea, walking without a goal, reading without a plan, sleeping without an alarm clock. And each of them was a gesture of care, not as a reward for productivity, but as a right that didn't need to be justified. I stopped being always available. I stopped responding immediately. I stopped being online even when I was tired. And that didn't make me indifferent. It made me honest. I didn't hide. I simply no longer forced myself to be where I couldn't be. Rest taught me to listen to myself. Not through analysis, but through feeling. I started asking, what do I need right now? Sometimes, silence. Sometimes a walk. Sometimes, nothing. And I allowed myself to do it. Without guilt. Without explanations. I realized that rest is not weakness. It is a form of love. For myself. Life. To a body that works every day. To a heart that beats even when I don't pay attention to it. This doesn't mean that I stopped working, stopped creating, stopped being active. But now I know that a break is not the end. It's part of the process, part of the rhythm, part of me. I no longer wait until fatigue becomes unbearable. I no longer prove that I deserve rest. I simply take it, the right, the need, as a gesture of respect for myself. And what's strange is that it was when I stopped running that I began to return. To myself, to life, to the moment when there's nothing to prove. I've been writing for others for a long time. Texts, posts, answers, ideas. Everything had to be useful, beautiful, understandable. I was used to the fact that every word had a purpose. That every thought had to be formalized. That every sentence had to give something to someone. And I forgot what it was like to write simply for myself. One evening I sat down at my desk and opened a notebook. Without a plan. Without a topic. Without expectations. I just wanted to write something that would not be for publication or for evaluation. Something that didn't have to be right. Something that didn't have to be understandable. And I wrote, "Hello, it's me. I know you're tired." It was unexpected. It was as if I was addressing myself as a friend. As if I were addressing someone I hadn't seen in a long time. And I continued, "I know you've been holding on for a long time. That you didn't allow yourself to stop. That you were afraid to be weak. But I'm here. And I'm not demanding anything. I just want you to rest." I wrote slowly. Without rushing. Without structure. Just letting the words flow. And each one was like a touch. Like a gesture of care. Like a reminder that I am not just an action. I am a person. And I deserve tenderness. In that letter I didn't make excuses. I didn't explain. I didn't analyze. I just acknowledged. I acknowledged fatigue. I acknowledged fear. I acknowledged the need for a pause. And that wasn't weakness. It was strength, to call things by their rightful names. I wrote, "I no longer apologize for being tired. I no longer argue that I deserve a pause. I simply take it. 'Cause I am alive. And I have the right to pause." That letter became a point of support for me. I didn't reread it every day. But I knew it was there. That I could return to it when I started to forget myself again. When I want to be strong instead of honest again. I started writing more often. Not for content. Not for the public. Just for myself. And each text was like a conversation. As a way to hear myself. As a way not to get lost in the noise. I realized that words are also a home. If they are real. If they are not a mask. If they are not a role. And I started to build this home. Slowly. Carefully. With respect. The letter I wrote to myself didn't change everything at once. But it opened the door. To a space where I can be not perfect. Not productive. Not strong. But just myself. And that is the most important thing I allowed myself. It didn't happen suddenly. There was no moment when I woke up and said, "That's it, I'm not afraid of rest anymore." It was a process. Slow, uneven, honest. I learned to stop. I learned not to explain. I learned not to apologize. And each step was like coming home. I began to notice how much fear I had. Fear of being inactive. Fear of being uninterested. Fear of being forgotten. And all these fears made me move even when I didn't have the strength. Made me speak even when I wanted to be silent. Made me create even when I had nothing to say. But over time I learned to recognize these impulses. And not to follow them. I learned to stay. I learned not to respond immediately. I learned not to be always available. And it didn't make me indifferent. Made me real. I no longer wait until the fatigue became unbearable. I no longer argue that I deserve a break. I simply take it. It's part of life. It's part of myself. As something that doesn't need to be justified. I have learned to rest without guilt. And that doesn't mean I don't do anything. It means I no longer live in survival mode. I no longer run away from myself. I no longer force myself to be someone I don't want to be. Rest has become for me not an escape, but a form of presence. I don't disappear when I stop. I show up. I don't lose myself when I'm silent. Find myself. I don't weaken when I allow myself to pause. Become more honest. It's not always easy. Sometimes I still hear voices that say, you have to be productive. You have to show something. You have to be strong. But now I know that I can ignore them. That I can remain silent. That I can be myself, without proof, without roles, without fear. I learned to rest without guilt. And this is not the end. This is the beginning. The beginning of a life in which I do not run away. In which I do not hide. In which I do not disappear. Simply am. I am Valak. And I no longer apologize for the fact that I need peace. 'Cause life is not a race. It is breathing. And I am finally breathing.